It's Thanksgiving. The low hum of my extended family's laughter fills the cavernous dining room, a sound as familiar and traditional as the perfectly roasted turkey sitting center stage. The table is a spectacle of casual wealth, golden cutlery, heavy in the hand, crystal wine glasses that catch the light from the chandelier and splinter it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. Embroidered napkins, stiff with starch, sit beside plates of fine china that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. It's just like every year, a perfect portrait of a perfect family. Except for me. I'm not at the grand oak table. I'm over here, in the corner, at the flimsy card table they reserve for the children. But there are no children here this year. There is only me. In my hands, I'm holding a paper plate. It's starting to get soft from the condensation of the green bean casserole. My fork is plastic, a flimsy white thing that I know will snap if I try to spear a piece of turkey too aggressively. Ashlyn, could you be a dear and grab more napkins from the garage? My cousin Emery chirps. Her voice is laced with a cloying, fake sweetness, and she pitches it just loud enough for the entire main table to hear. Her lips, painted a festive cranberry red, are pulled into a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. It's a performance, and I'm the prop. A wave of chuckles ripples through the adults. It's not loud, just a soft, condescending murmur. I see my sister Brielle lean over to her husband and whisper something. I can't hear the words, but I see the smirk on her face as she glances my way. It's the same smirk she's given me my whole life. Then she speaks a little louder, a stage whisper for my benefit. Still the helper girl, huh? My knuckles are white where I grip the edge of my paper plate. A hot, familiar shame rises in my cheeks. For a moment, the old impulse takes over. The urge to shrink, to make myself smaller, to apologize for taking up space. The urge to just do as I'm told, to scurry off to the garage like a good little servant and fetch the napkins just to make the moment pass. But I don't. I don't say a word. Not yet. Instead, I take a slow, deep breath, letting it fill my lungs. The air tastes like roasted garlic and betrayal. I place my plastic fork down on the paper plate with deliberate care. I push my chair back from the wobbly card table, the metal legs scraping softly against the polished hardwood floor. Every eye is on me. They expect me to fetch the napkins. They expect me to obey. I turn and walk calmly toward the hallway, my footsteps echoing in the sudden, curious quiet. My purse is on the small console table by the door, right where I left it. My hand doesn't shake as I open it. I reach past my wallet, past my keys, and my fingers close around a crisp, folded sheaf of papers. The deed. The weight of it in my hand is immense, so much heavier than a few sheets of paper should be. It's the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights, of paint-stained hands and an aching back. It's the weight of freedom. When I return to the dining room, the low murmur of conversation has resumed, but it dies the second I step back into the light. It evaporates, like a candle flame snuffed out in a sudden gust of wind. My uncle, mid-laugh, freezes, his fork hovering halfway to his mouth. My aunt, reaching for her wine glass, jerks her hand back, as if the crystal were suddenly hot, nearly tipping it over. I walk past the kids' table. I walk right up to the main table, to the empty space between the golden brown turkey and the porcelain gravy boat. And with a quiet thud, I lay the paper on the gleaming oak surface. The silence that follows is absolute. It's a heavy, crushing silence that sucks all the air out of the room. I look up, my gaze sweeping across their faces. Emery's fake smile has melted away, replaced by a slack-jawed confusion. Brielle is staring at the documents, her brow furrowed. I finally look at my parents, sitting at opposite ends of the table like a king and queen presiding over their court. "This house?" I ask, my voice steady and clear, cutting through the silence. "The one you're all laughing in? The one with the crystal and the china and the big important table?" I let the question hang in the air for a beat. "You're eating in my house." I look my mother dead in the eye. I look at my father. I bought it, months ago. The silence that follows is different. It's not just quiet, it's a void, and that's when their faces truly freeze. It happens one by one, a chain reaction of shock. My uncle's fork finally clatters onto his plate, the sound like a gunshot in the stillness. My aunt's face goes chalky white. Emery looks like she's seen a ghost. Brielle's mouth opens and closes, but no sound comes out. They are statues, carved from disbelief and horror, pale, jaws dropped, completely and utterly speechless. But this story, this perfect frozen moment of revelation, didn't start here. It started a year ago, at this very table. It started with a different paper plate, and with a wound so deep it changed everything. Last Thanksgiving, the air was just as thick with the scent of sage and thyme, but my world felt entirely different. I stood in the kitchen, a sheen of sweat on my forehead, frantically stirring a green bean casserole that threatened to burn. The oven radiated a blistering heat, and the steam from a pot of boiling potatoes fogged up the window. No one offered to help. From the living room, I could hear the roar of the crowd from the football game on TV, punctuated by my father's and uncle's triumphant shouts. My mother, instead of helping, stood in the doorway, barking orders like a drill sergeant. "The turkey needs basting, Ashlyn. Did you remember to warm the rolls? Don't let those potatoes boil over." My father drifted in once, opened the refrigerator, grabbed a beer, and walked out without a single glance in my direction. My cousins were sprawled on the couches, their eyes glued to the game, occasionally yelling for more chips, a request my aunt would relay to me. I wasn't a guest, I was unpaid staff. When the feast was finally laid out on the grand oak table, a masterpiece of culinary effort I had almost single-handedly produced, I realized with a sinking heart that something was wrong. There was a flurry of activity as everyone found their seats, the scraping of chairs, the clinking of glasses. My mother, doing a final head count, clicked her tongue. "Oh dear, it seems we're short one place setting." She looked around, her eyes scanning the table, and then they landed on me, standing awkwardly by the kitchen door. A flicker of something, annoyance, pity, crossed her face before she smiled, a tight, brittle smile. "Ashlyn, honey, you don't mind, do you? We'll just grab you a paper plate." It wasn't a question. Before I could answer, my uncle was already rummaging in the pantry, emerging with a single flimsy paper plate from a dusty pack left over from a summer barbecue. He handed it to me, with a dismissive pat on the shoulder. Humiliation washed over me, hot and sickening. I took the plate, my fingers trembling slightly. As I served myself a small portion of the food I had spent all day cooking, my aunt leaned in close, her voice a conspiratorial, venomous whisper that was meant only for me. "It's just that, well, you're not really family, you know?" She gestured vaguely with her wineglass. "You still live at home, no real job, no future. You're basically just crashing here. These seats are for the adults who contribute." I felt the blood drain from my face. I couldn't form a response. I just took my paper plate and retreated to a lone chair in the corner of the room, near the entryway, as far from the gleaming main table as I could get. I sat there, a ghost at my own family's feast, and watched them. They laughed about year-end bonuses and stock options. They planned ski trips to Aspen. Emery showed off a new diamond bracelet, a gift from her fiancé. Brielle talked endlessly about her upcoming promotion at the law firm. I tried to join in, just once. When the conversation turned to dessert, I cleared my throat. "I could bring a pie next year," I offered, my voice barely a whisper. "Maybe a pumpkin pecan." Brielle, overhearing me, let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a cruel, ugly sound. She looked at me, her eyes full of pity and disdain. "Just try not to burn it," she scoffed, and the whole table chuckled. The pain of that comment burned hotter than any oven. It seared itself into my memory. It wasn't just about the plate, or the lack of a seat. It was the stark, undeniable truth laid bare. I wasn't part of this family. I was their live-in maid, their cautionary tale, the family failure they kept around for convenience. That night, I didn't sleep in my own bed. My room had been given to a visiting cousin. I was relegated to the guest room, a cold, impersonal space with a lumpy mattress and a window that rattled with every gust of wind. I lay there in the dark, silent tears streaming down my face, soaking the cheap pillowcase. I could hear them downstairs, the party still going. Their laughter drifted up through the floorboards, loud and carefree. And then I heard my parents' voices, distinct and clear. My mother's high-pitched giggle. "I wonder how long Ashlyn's going to mope this time," she said. My father's gruff reply, "She'll get over it, she always does." But he was wrong. I wouldn't get over it. That was my breaking point. Lying in that cold, lonely room, listening to the people who were supposed to love me laugh at my pain, something inside me snapped. The grief and humiliation curdled, hardening into a cold, diamond-hard resolve. I sat up, wiped the tears from my eyes with the back of my hand, and stared at my own faint reflection in the dark window. I made a vow, a silent promise to the broken girl staring back at me. "Next year," I whispered, my voice raw but steady. "Next year, I won't be sitting in the corner. Next year, they'll know exactly who I am." The year that followed began with a whimper. Armed with my newfound resolve, I threw myself into the job market, polishing my resume until the words blurred. The problem was, the words themselves were the issue. Art history, Bachelor of Arts. To potential employers, it was a punchline. I sent out hundreds of applications for anything that seemed remotely creative or professional. Gallery assistant, museum curator, marketing coordinator, graphic design intern. The responses, when they came at all, were a symphony of rejection. "We're looking for a candidate with more practical experience. The position has been filled internally." Most of the time there was just silence. My applications vanished into the digital ether, and I was left staring at my empty inbox, the silence a louder indictment than any rejection letter. At home, the atmosphere was thick with condescension. Every time I sat at my laptop, my mother would walk by and sigh. "Still playing on the computer, Ashlyn? Maybe you should try applying at the grocery store. They're always hiring." Brielle, during her weekly visits, would look at me with a pitying smirk. "Any luck joining the real world yet?" My father just avoided the topic altogether, which was somehow worse. His silence was a confirmation of what they all thought. I was a lost cause. My savings dwindled. The small fund I'd built up from years of odd jobs and birthday checks was nearly gone. Desperation led me to the underbelly of the gig economy. I started cleaning houses. My first client was a friend of a friend, a bachelor who lived in a high-rise apartment downtown. I spent 6 hours on my hands and knees, scrubbing floors, scouring a neglected bathroom, wiping away layers of grime. I came home that evening smelling of bleach and ammonia, my back a knot of screaming muscles. My hands, soft from years of holding paintbrushes, were raw and red, the skin around my nails starting to bleed. I made $80. That night, I ate a bowl of instant ramen over the sink, too exhausted to even sit at the table. It was the start of a new routine. Days were spent cleaning other people's houses, erasing their messes, making their lives shine, while mine felt duller and more tarnished than ever. Nights were for a different kind of work. I hunched over my laptop, not looking for jobs anymore, but for knowledge. I devoured YouTube videos, my screen glowing in the dark of my room. How to start a business with no money. Understanding LLCs and sole proprietorships. Secrets of passive income. Is house flipping right for you? It all felt like a different language, a world away from Renaissance art and Gothic architecture. It seemed abstract, impossible, a dream for other people. But I kept watching. I kept learning. Then, a flicker of light. A local cafe, a trendy little spot I'd always admired, put out a call on their Instagram story. They were looking for an artist to paint a small mural on an exposed brick wall in their back room. The pay was $200. It wasn't much, but to me, it felt like a fortune. I spent 2 days sketching a design, pouring all my frustration and hope into it. I sent it in, expecting nothing. They replied an hour later. They loved it. The day I painted that mural was the first day I felt alive in months. The smell of the paint, the feel of the brush in my hand, it was like coming home. I worked for 10 hours straight, fueled by coffee and a fierce, desperate energy. When I was done, I stood back and looked at the wall, now covered in a vibrant cascade of coffee beans and swirling steam. It was good. It was really good. The cafe owner was thrilled. He handed me two crisp $100 bills. I walked to my car, clutching the money in my hand, and the moment I shut the door, I burst into tears. They weren't tears of sadness, but of overwhelming, gut-wrenching relief. It was mine. I had earned it. That night, I didn't eat ramen. I bought myself a rotisserie chicken from the grocery store and ate it sitting at the kitchen table like a civilized human being. And then, with my stomach full and my heart pounding, I went online and paid the fee to register a limited liability company. I typed the name into the box, my fingers hovering over the keyboard for a moment before pressing enter. Vivid Walls Co. The LLC registration was a piece of paper, but it felt like a shield. I started sketching new designs every night, building a small portfolio. I learned the basics of social media marketing, creating an Instagram account for Vivid Walls Co. I started sending direct messages to local businesses, restaurants, boutiques, yoga studios. Hi, I'm a local mural artist and I love your space. I have a few ideas for how we could make it even more unique. The rejection started all over again. Most messages were left unseen. Some got a polite no thank you. A few were curt, not interested. It was a new kind of grind, just as exhausting as scrubbing floors. While Brielle posted selfies from her vacation in Greece, her skin tanned and glowing against a backdrop of the sparkling Aegean Sea, I posted time-lapses of me painting in my garage, videos that got 12 views and one comment from my own dummy account. The contrast was a constant, sharp pain, but I kept going. One night, scrubbing dried acrylic paint off my brushes in the utility sink in the garage, the smell of turpentine sharp in my nostrils, I looked at my stained hands and whispered to the darkness, "This is what rock bottom actually feels like. There's nowhere to go but up." The turning point came on a Tuesday. I was perched on a stepladder outside a newly opened gym, putting the finishing touches on a large, dynamic mural of a tiger, its stripes rendered in the gym's bold orange and black branding. It was my third official project as Vivid Walls Co., a small but significant step up from the cafe. The sun was beating down, and sweat was trickling down my back, but I was in the zone, lost in the rhythm of the brushstrokes. That's when I noticed her. A woman was standing on the sidewalk, watching me. She wasn't just glancing as she passed by. She was stationary, her arms crossed, her head tilted slightly. She looked to be in her late 60s, with a chic silver bob and expensive-looking glasses that framed a pair of intensely sharp, intelligent eyes. She was dressed in a tailored blazer and dark jeans, an ensemble that screamed effortless sophistication. She just stood there for a full 15 minutes, her expression unreadable. I felt a nervous flutter in my stomach, trying to focus on the tiger's eye, making sure the glint of light was just right. Finally, she walked over, stopping at the base of my ladder. "You ever painted corporate interiors?" Her voice was crisp, direct, with no preamble. I nearly dropped my brush. I looked down at her, momentarily stunned. No," I stammered, my heart thumping against my ribs. "No, I mostly do this." I gestured vaguely at the tiger. Then a spark of the new me, the me that didn't shrink, flickered to life. I took a breath. "But I can learn." A slow smile spread across her face. It wasn't a warm smile, but it was genuine. It was a smile of appraisal, of recognition. "Follow me," she said, then turned and started walking down the street without a second glance to see if I was complying. Scrambling down the ladder, I wiped my hands on a rag, capped my paint, and hurried after her. My mind was racing. Who was this woman? What did she want? She led me 2 blocks down to a sleek modern building with a minimalist sign that read, Hensley Design Group. Her name was Maureen Hensley, and as it turned out, she owned one of the most sought-after boutique commercial design agencies in the city. She didn't waste time with small talk. She led me into a pristine, white-walled office and got straight to the point. She had clients, high-end corporate clients, who were increasingly looking for unique, art-driven elements in their spaces. She'd been looking for a new artist, someone with raw talent and, as she put it, a bit of hunger. She decided to test me. The project was small, a trial by fire, a pediatric dentist's waiting room. The client wanted something whimsical and engaging, something to distract nervous children. I poured every ounce of my creativity into it. I didn't just paint animals on the wall. I designed an entire ecosystem, a jungle scene where cartoon monkeys swung from vines that wrapped around the light fixtures and colorful parrots peeked out from behind the reception desk. I worked for 3 days straight, barely sleeping, obsessed with getting every detail perfect. When I was finished, Maureen came to inspect it. She walked through the room slowly, her sharp eyes missing nothing. She ran a hand over a painted toucan, then looked at me. "You've got taste," she said, her voice matter of fact. "And grit. I saw it on the sidewalk. You weren't just painting, you were fighting with that wall." She paused, her gaze piercing. "A word of advice: don't waste your energy trying to prove people wrong. It's a hollow victory. Prove yourself right." Those words landed with the force of a revelation. All this time, my motivation had been a dark, churning thing, fueled by the desire to show my family, to throw their condescension back in their faces. Maureen was offering a different path, a brighter one. She introduced me to my first real client through her agency, a small tech firm looking for a feature wall in their new office. She taught me how to draft a professional proposal, how to calculate my costs, how to price my labor not as a starving artist, but as a skilled contractor. She was tough, demanding, and brutally honest, but for every job I completed to her standards, she offered another referral, another connection. "This isn't charity," she told me one afternoon over coffee, after I'd just landed my fourth project. "You earn, I earn. My reputation is on the line with every artist I recommend. There are no handouts in this business, Ashlyn, only opportunities." I looked at this formidable woman, this unexpected mentor, who had appeared out of nowhere. She wasn't offering me a safety net. She was offering me a ladder, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had the strength to climb it. "Yes," I said, my voice full of a conviction I hadn't felt before. "I understand." The months that followed were a blur of paint, plaster, and progress. The first thing I did with the money from that tech firm job was reinvest it. I retired my hodgepodge of student-grade brushes and half-empty tubes of paint. I walked into a professional art supply store and bought the best of everything: high pigmentation acrylics, a set of expensive German brushes, a portable scaffolding system that saved my back, and even a high-quality projector to help scale my sketches onto massive walls. Vivid Walls Co. was no longer just a name on a legal document. It was becoming a real, tangible operation. My Instagram account, once a lonely gallery of my garage projects, began to transform. I started posting slick, professional-looking before and after shots. A drab cafe wall becoming a vibrant Italian streetscape. A sterile salon reception area blossoming into a tranquil forest scene. A bland tech startup office energized by a bold geometric abstract. The likes and follows started to trickle in, then flow. Local business owners started messaging me, not the other way around. The workload became too much for one person. I was working 18-hour days, sketching and planning at night, painting during the day, and handling all the administrative work in between. I was exhausted, but it was a good kind of exhaustion, the kind that comes from building something with your own two hands. It was time to expand. I put out a small ad on a local job board for a part-time assistant. That's how I met Harper. She was a few years younger than me, with bright purple hair and a portfolio full of brilliant, edgy graphic design work. During her interview, she confessed that her family was pressuring her to abandon her art hobby and get a real job in accounting. She said her parents called her the black sheep. I hired her on the spot. We bonded instantly, our connection forged over late-night coffees while prepping walls for a new project, our shared experience as family outcasts creating an unspoken, powerful understanding between us. She had a keen eye for color and a steady hand, and she quickly became indispensable. That year, Christmas was a repeat performance of Thanksgiving, just with more tinsel. My family gathered, and the conversation was the same: bonuses, promotions, and Brielle's upcoming ski trip to Switzerland. They asked me what I was up to these days, and I just smiled and said, "Oh, just some art stuff." They'd nod condescendingly, and changed the subject. That's nice, dear. They had no idea that the art stuff had just cleared 5 figures in revenue for the quarter. They thought I was the same unemployed, directionless Ashlyn, living off their charity. As I sat there listening to them boast and belittle, a strange thing happened. The old sting of shame was gone. It had been replaced by a quiet, steady confidence, a secret knowledge that I held close to my chest. I watched them, but I no longer felt like a pathetic outsider. I felt like an anthropologist observing a foreign tribe. This time, when Brielle made a snide remark about me probably needing some cash for Christmas presents, I just smiled a genuine, serene smile. The secret of my growing business was a warm glow inside me, a shield against their casual cruelty. They thought I was running in place. In reality, I was lapping them. The call from Maureen that changed everything came on a rainy March morning. "Are you sitting down?" she asked, her voice crackling with an unusual energy. "I have a big one for you, a very big one." She connected me with the regional manager for a mid-size hotel chain, the Cypress Inn. They were undergoing a major rebranding, aiming for a more boutique, art-focused feel. They wanted custom art, unique murals in 15 of their suites at their flagship downtown location. Each room was to have a different theme, inspired by local landmarks. Maureen had shown them my portfolio, and they were impressed. She had already negotiated the preliminary terms. The contract, she said, would be for $12,000. $12,000. The number seemed unreal, a figure from a different world. It was more money than I had ever seen in one place in my entire life. After I hung up the phone, I didn't feel excitement. I felt sheer, paralyzing terror. I paced my small studio space, my heart hammering against my ribs. A voice in my head, a voice that sounded a lot like my mother's, screamed at me. "You can't do this. This is for real professionals. You're just a girl who cleans houses and paints on the side. You're going to fail, and everyone will know you're a fraud." I almost called Maureen back to tell her I couldn't do it. The weight of the expectation was crushing. 15 rooms, a major hotel chain. What if they hated it? What if I messed it up? My self-doubt was a physical thing, a cold knot in my stomach. That night I sat on the floor of my studio, surrounded by sketches, and cried. I cried for the girl with the paper plate, and for the woman who was terrified she would never be more than that. The next morning, I saw Harper's car pull up. She walked in with 2 coffees and a box of donuts, took one look at my tear-streaked face and the chaotic mess of papers, and sat down on the floor next to me. "Okay," she said calmly. "Talk to me. What's the monster we're slaying today?" I told her everything. The hotel, the money, the fear. She listened patiently, then took a sip of her coffee. "So what?" she said. "So it's a big project. You've handled every other project. What's different about this one, besides the number of zeros on the check?" She picked up one of my sketches, a beautiful rendering of the old city bridge at sunset. "This is brilliant, Ashlyn. You know it is. The only person who thinks you can't do this is you." Her simple, unwavering faith was the antidote to my panic. She was right. I had the skills. I just needed the courage. We spent the next hour breaking it down, room by room, creating a detailed project plan, a schedule, a supply list. The fear began to recede, replaced by a familiar, focused energy. The following 6 weeks were the most intense of my life. Harper and I worked around the clock, a 2-woman army of creativity and grit. We prepped walls, we sketched, we projected, we painted. We moved from room to room, transforming blank beige spaces into unique worlds. We painted the historic waterfront, the lush botanical gardens, the city's iconic skyline at twilight. We were meticulous, driven, and utterly exhausted. The day of the final walkthrough with the hotel manager, I felt that old terror creeping back in. But as he walked through the rooms, his expression shifted from neutral professionalism to genuine awe. He stopped in front of a mural depicting the local farmers' market, a vibrant explosion of color and life. This is incredible," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "This is better than I ever imagined." They loved it. They absolutely loved it. We finished the project on time, and thanks to some clever supply management, slightly under budget. The $12,000 check felt heavy in my hand, a solid, tangible symbol of my victory over my own fear. Word of the Cypress Inn project spread like wildfire through the city's design and hospitality communities. My phone started ringing. My email inbox was flooded. Suddenly, Vivid Walls Co. wasn't just a small local business. We were players. I used a portion of the hotel money to hire a web developer to build a professional, polished website. I ordered high-quality embroidered polo shirts with our logo on them for me and Harper. The first time I put one on, I looked in the mirror and saw not just Ashlyn, the family disappointment, but Ashlyn, the founder and lead artist of Vivid Walls Co. It was a brand, and it was mine. The success of the hotel project brought a new kind of attention, and with it, a new kind of decision. One afternoon, Maureen invited me to her office. It felt different from our usual meetings. The air was formal, charged with significance. She had a leather-bound folder on her desk. Vivid Walls is growing faster than anyone could have predicted, she began, her gaze steady. You've proven your talent, and more importantly, your business acumen. But to get to the next level, larger corporate contracts, statewide projects, you'll need capital, and you'll need more infrastructure. She slid the folder across the polished desk towards me. I opened it. Inside was a formal proposal. My heart skipped a beat as I read the words. Hensley Design Group was offering to invest $80,000 in Vivid Walls Co. In exchange, they wanted a 40% stake in my company. $80,000. The number was staggering. I could use it to lease a larger studio, hire more artists, buy a company van. It was a fast track to the big leagues. It meant security, stability, a partnership with the most respected name in the city. The offer was more than fair. It was generous. For a moment I was dizzy with the possibility. I could say yes and instantly solve a dozen problems. I could finally relax, knowing I had the backing of a powerhouse like Maureen. I looked up from the proposal, my mind racing. I saw the path that saying yes would open up, a smoother, faster, safer road. But I also saw what it would cost me. 40%. It wasn't just a number, it was a piece of my dream. A piece of the vow I made to myself in that cold guest room. I thought about my family. I thought about the paper plate. This whole journey, this whole company, was born from a need to build something that was mine and mine alone. Something they couldn't touch, couldn't belittle, couldn't claim any part of. Handing over 40%, even to a mentor I deeply respected, felt like a betrayal of that original desperate promise. I took a deep breath. Maureen, I started, my voice shaking slightly. This is an incredible offer. I'm honored, truly. I pushed the folder gently back across the desk. But I have to decline. Her eyebrows shot up, a flicker of surprise in her sharp eyes. I found my voice, my conviction solidifying as I spoke. This dream, this company, it has to be mine. All of it. I need to know that I built it. Every single piece. I have to own it. I held my breath, expecting disappointment, maybe even anger. Instead, after a long moment of silence, Maureen leaned back in her chair, and a slow, genuine nod of respect softened her features. Smart, she said, her voice quiet. Risky, but smart. I had a feeling you might say that. She closed the folder. The offer stands, should you ever change your mind, but I suspect you won't. I left her office that day, feeling terrified and exhilarated all at once. I had turned down a fortune, and yet I had never felt richer. That evening, by some cosmic coincidence, my parents had invited me to dinner. It was a rare occasion, usually prompted by some perceived family obligation. As we sat at the dinner table, my mother asked the perfunctory question, "So how is your little art thing going?" The phrase "little art thing" used to feel like a needle prick. Now it was almost funny. I thought about the $80,000 offer I had just turned down. I thought about the fact that Vivid Walls Co. had cleared over $70,000 in profit in the last 3 months alone. My parents, who were so proud of Brielle's $40,000 a year paralegal job, had no concept of the world I was now operating in. A slow smile spread across my face. It was a real smile, full of secrets they would never guess. "It's going well," I said, taking a sip of water. "Yeah, the little art thing is doing just fine." The world of commercial art wasn't always as pristine as Maureen's office. It had its dark corners, its grimy back alleys, and I was about to stumble into one. A new client, the owner of a chain of high-end, trendy restaurants, approached me directly. He'd seen the Cypress Inn project and was effusive with his praise. He wanted a massive floor-to-ceiling mural for the flagship location of his new restaurant, the Gilded Fork. The budget he proposed was astronomical, $25,000. It was a single project that would eclipse everything I'd earned to date. The meeting was held in his sleek, minimalist office overlooking the city. He was charming, fast-talking, a man who oozed success. He showed me the space, and then he showed me what he wanted. He pulled up an image on his widescreen monitor. It was a stunning piece of art, a unique, abstract style I immediately recognized. It was the signature work of a well-known artist from New York, a woman whose work I deeply admired. "I want this," the owner said, pointing at the screen. "Exactly this. Your work has a similar feel. You can pull it off. I want people to walk in here and feel like they're in a gallery in Soho." A cold feeling washed over me. "You mean, you want something inspired by her style?" I asked, trying to give him an out. He laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "Inspired, copied, what's the difference? I want that look. Can you do it or not?" The air in the room suddenly felt thin. $25,000. That money could change everything. I could finally afford to give Harper a full-time salary with benefits. I could pay my own rent for 2 years. The pressure was immense. The practical side of my brain was screaming at me to just say yes. It's just paint on a wall. Who will know? But the artist in me, the person who had cried with relief after earning her first $200, honestly, felt sick. To so blatantly steal another artist's soul, her unique creative fingerprint, it felt like a violation. I hesitated. I thought about the bills piling up, about Harper's hopeful face when I'd told her about this potential gig. I could see the path of compromise stretching out before me, paved with money, and a slow, creeping rot in my soul. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice barely a whisper but firm. "I can't do that. I can create something original for you in my own style, something that will be unique to your restaurant, but I can't copy another artist's work." The owner's charming smile vanished. His face hardened, his eyes turning to cold, hard chips of stone. "Are you kidding me?" he sneered. "I'm offering you the biggest payday of your life, and you're giving me a lecture on artistic integrity. Get out of my office." He didn't just fire me, he dismissed me, as if I were a piece of trash he was scraping off his shoe. The walk back to my car was a blur of shame and panic. Had I just made the biggest mistake of my life? The consequences were immediate and brutal. The loss of that potential income threw our finances into a tailspin. We had been counting on that contract to cover our operating costs for the next quarter. I had to tell a heartbroken Harper that I couldn't increase her hours, let alone offer her a full-time position. We hit a dry spell with new clients, and for the first time, I couldn't make payroll out of the business account. I paid Harper out of my own dwindling personal savings. To buy a new batch of paint for a small job we did have, we had to sell the company iPad. It felt like a massive, humiliating step backward. I was at my lowest point, questioning every decision I'd ever made, when my phone rang. It was Maureen. "Ashlyn," she said, her voice grim. "I just wanted to call and, well, I heard what happened with the Gilded Fork." I braced myself for a lecture, for an "I told you so" about being naive. "That client fired me this morning," she continued, and I could hear the anger in her voice. "He tried to get me to use a knockoff of a designer chair in his lobby. When I refused, he told me he'd find a designer with more flexible ethics." She sighed, a weary sound. "I just wanted to tell you that you did the right thing. Integrity has a cost, Ashlyn, but in the long run it's the only asset that's truly worth anything." I hung up the phone, a wave of profound relief washing over me. I was still broke. The future of my company was still uncertain. But Maureen's words were a lifeline. That night I slept more soundly than I had in months. my conscience clear, even if my bank account was empty. Just when I thought I had weathered the storm of my moral test, a new, more personal tempest began to brew. It started, as so many family dramas do, in a WhatsApp chat. My cousin Emery, who I hadn't spoken to in months, must have been doing some online snooping. She found the Vivid Walls Co. Instagram page. My phone buzzed with a notification from the Family Fun group chat. It was a screenshot of my company's page. Underneath it, Emery had written, "OMG guys, look at Ashlyn's business, she's a painter now. So artistic." The message was punctuated with a string of laughing, crying emojis. My stomach twisted into a knot. The comments started rolling in immediately. An uncle wrote, "Is that like house painting? Good for her for finding a trade." An aunt chimed in, "How cute! A little hobby to keep her busy." They weren't just dismissive, they were infantilizing, reducing my hard-won company to a child's craft project. I wanted to scream, to send them the link to the Cypress Inn feature, to show them my profit and loss statements, but I knew it would be useless. They would only see what they wanted to see. Then, it got worse. A few days later, a notification popped up from my business's Google page, a new 1-star review. My heart sank. I clicked on it. The review was vicious. "Total scam," it read in all caps. "The artist is an unprofessional hack. She did a terrible job, was rude, and overcharged for what is basically glorified graffiti. Do not hire this company. They are a joke." The reviewer's name was anonymous, just a random string of letters and numbers. I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. It was a lie, a complete fabrication. I had never had an unhappy client. The next day, another 1-star review appeared, this one on Yelp, from a different anonymous account, but with similarly vicious, baseless claims. It called me a fraud and accused me of using cheap, toxic materials. The impact was swift and devastating. My phone, which had started ringing again with small inquiries, went silent. An email I was expecting with a signed contract from a new boutique never arrived. I followed up, and the owner replied with a curt, one-line message, "We've decided to go in a different direction." 2 days later, a major client, a yoga studio chain I was in the final stages of negotiation with, canceled our meeting, citing concerns they had seen online. I knew in my gut who was behind it. It had a vindictive, personal cruelty that felt chillingly familiar. I drove to Brielle's pristine suburban house and confronted her. I found her in her gleaming kitchen, unloading organic groceries into her stainless steel refrigerator. I didn't even say hello. I just held up my phone, showing her the reviews. "Was this you?" She didn't even have the decency to look guilty. She closed the refrigerator door and leaned against it, crossing her arms. A smug, cold smile played on her lips. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said, but her eyes told a different story. "Don't lie to me, Brielle," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and hurt. "Why would you do this? This is my life, my livelihood." Her smile widened. "Oh, Ashlyn," she said, her voice dripping with condescending pity. "You just don't get it, do you? This livelihood of yours is an embarrassment. You're playing dress-up as a business owner. It's pathetic. You'll never be anything more than a joke, and I'm just helping everyone else see it." Her words hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just sabotage. It was a declaration of war. I drove home in a daze, her pronouncement echoing in my head. "You'll never be more than a joke." That night, for the first time since starting my business, I gave up. I crawled into bed and pulled the covers over my head, the world feeling too sharp, too cruel to face. I didn't answer my phone. I didn't check my emails. I just lay there in the dark, a hollowed-out shell of myself. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was just a girl with a silly art degree playing dress-up. Maybe I was destined to be the family failure, the girl with the paper plate forever. I stayed in bed for a full 24 hours, letting the despair wash over me. The next afternoon, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again. Finally, with a groan, I reached for it, expecting another cancellation or a pitying text from my mom. It was a message from Harper. It wasn't long, just 7 words. Get up. You built all this. Remember that. I read the words, and something shifted inside me. It was a tiny flicker in the overwhelming darkness, but it was there. You built all this. I thought of the $80 cleaning job, the joy of that first $200 check, the terror and triumph of the Cypress Inn project, the moral victory of turning down the plagiarism job. I had built it from nothing, with my own 2 hands, stained with paint and grime. I sat up in bed. I wiped the stale tears from my eyes. Brielle wanted me to be a joke? Emery and the rest of them wanted to laugh at my little art thing? Fine, let them laugh. I wasn't going to fight back with angry words or public accusations. That was their game. I was going to fight back with success. A success so undeniable, so overwhelming, that their laughter would choke in their throats. I got out of bed, took a shower, and went back to work. The attacks from my family, as vicious as they were, forced a necessary evolution. Playing the social media game and waiting for clients to find me was no longer a viable strategy. It was too public, too vulnerable to the kind of sabotage Brielle had so gleefully deployed. I needed a new angle, a way to build my business in the shadows, far from their prying, judgmental eyes. I needed to go where the money was, not where the likes were. My new strategy was born from one of Maureen's old pieces of advice. Follow the money, Ashlyn. Art is nice, but commerce is king. So I started thinking, who needs art but doesn't think about it until the last minute? Who has a budget for aesthetics but is too busy to scroll through Instagram? The answer was commercial real estate brokers. They were in the business of selling or leasing large, empty, soulless spaces. My art could be the thing that transformed a generic office box into a must-have creative workspace. I spent a week compiling a list of the top commercial real estate agencies in the city. I retooled my entire pitch. I wasn't just a muralist anymore. I was a visual solutions partner. I created a new, sleek presentation deck, and I came up with an irresistible offer. For any of their premium property listings, I would create a free photorealistic digital mock-up showing what a custom Vivid Walls mural could look like in their space. No cost, no obligation. I was betting that once they saw the after, they wouldn't be able to settle for the before. The first few brokers were skeptical, but one, a young, hungry agent named Marcus, decided to take a chance on a large, stubbornly unleasable office floor. I spent a full day creating a stunning mock-up, a dynamic, abstract piece that made the cavernous space look vibrant and modern. He put the mock-up images in the online listing. The property, which had sat vacant for 8 months, was leased within 2 weeks. The new tenant, a tech company, insisted that the mural be painted as a condition of the lease. Marcus called me, ecstatic. My phone didn't stop ringing after that. The conversions were, as he put it, off the charts. Brokers started competing to get me to do mock-ups for their listings. It was a backdoor into the industry. I was no longer chasing clients. Clients were being delivered to me, pre-sold on my vision. The business exploded. We landed 6 new corporate deals in 1 month alone, each one larger than the last. I finally had the capital to do everything I'd dreamed of. I hired Harper full-time, with a salary that made her cry with joy. I hired 2 more talented young artists to help with the workload. I leased a huge, light-filled warehouse space for our new office and studio, a place where we could prep large canvases and experiment with new techniques. I bought that company van. And through it all, I remained completely silent. I deleted my personal Facebook account. I stopped posting on the Vivid Walls Instagram, letting it lie dormant. To my family, it must have looked like I had finally given up, that my little art thing had failed, just as they had predicted. They stopped making jokes in the family chat. They simply stopped mentioning me at all. I had become invisible, and in that invisibility, I was building an empire. They still thought I was the unemployed loser living at home, the cautionary tale. The truth was, I was now the CEO of a rapidly growing 6-figure business. The irony was so rich, it was almost delicious. One evening, I went to my parents' house to drop off some mail that had been accidentally delivered to me. I let myself in with my old key, calling out, Hello? The house was quiet. I was about to leave the letters on the hall table when I heard hushed, tense voices coming from the den. It was my parents. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but my father's words froze me in place. "I don't know what we're going to do, Helen," he said, his voice strained, heavy with a weariness I'd never heard before. "The bank called again. We're 3 months behind. They're talking about foreclosure." My mother started to cry, a soft, defeated sound. "But this house, this is everything we have. Where would we go?" I stood motionless in the hallway, my heart pounding. Their fortress, the symbol of their success and my failure, was built on a foundation of sand. They were drowning in debt, projecting an image of prosperity, while their world was crumbling around them. A wave of pity washed over me, quickly followed by something else, an idea, a cold, clear, audacious idea. I backed out of the house as silently as I'd entered, the letters still in my hand. They didn't know I had been there. They didn't know I had overheard. The next morning, I didn't call my parents to offer help. I didn't offer them a loan. I put on my most professional suit, the one I wore to close deals, and I drove downtown. I didn't go to a real estate broker. I went straight to the bank. I got the name of the vice president in charge of mortgage defaults from the bank's directory. It took some convincing, but I managed to get a meeting with him. I walked into his office, calm and prepared. I introduced myself as the founder of Vivid Walls Co., a successful local business looking to make a real estate investment. I explained that I had become aware that a certain property, I gave him my parents' address, was in arrears. I didn't explain how I knew. I just stated it as a fact. Then I made my offer. I would buy the house. I would pay off the entire remaining mortgage balance and all associated fees, in cash. The banker stared at me, completely flabbergasted. He looked at the paperwork, then back at me. A cash offer to clear a defaulting mortgage was a dream scenario for the bank. It was clean, quick, and saved them the headache and expense of a formal foreclosure and resale. After a flurry of legal paperwork and a wire transfer that drained a significant but manageable portion of my business's capital account, it was done. 2 weeks later, a thick packet of documents arrived at my new office via courier. Inside was the title, free and clear. The deed to my parents' house, the house I grew up in, the house where I was handed paper plates and dismissed as a failure. It was now registered in my name, Ashlyn Porter. I took the deed and locked it in the safe in my office. I didn't tell a soul. Not Harper, not Maureen, not a single person. I just let the knowledge sit there, a silent, ticking time bomb, waiting for the perfect moment to detonate. And I knew exactly when that would be. The invitation arrived, as expected, in late October. It was a text from Emery, her words dripping with the usual condescension. "Hey Ash, hope you can make it for Thanksgiving this year. We're all really looking forward to it. Try not to be weird this year, okay? And just a friendly tip, maybe don't try to pitch your little art business to anyone. It just makes things awkward for everybody." Before I could even reply, a second text pinged. This one from Brielle. "And we'll try to save you a real plate this time. LOL. I read the texts, and I didn't feel a single flicker of the old anger or humiliation. Instead, I felt a profound, chilling sense of calm. The game was afoot, and they had just handed me the winning piece. They were inviting me to be humiliated in a house that I, unbeknownst to them, now owned. The dramatic irony was so potent, it was almost intoxicating. I typed back a cheerful reply. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Can't wait. The weeks leading up to Thanksgiving were a quiet exercise in preparation. I was no longer the mousy girl in a faded cardigan. I went to a high-end boutique and bought an outfit that was understated but screamed quality. A tailored cashmere sweater, perfectly fitting dark trousers, and elegant leather boots. It was an outfit that cost more than my first car. On the morning of Thanksgiving, I did something just for me. I drove my car, the sleek black Tesla I had bought myself as a bonus after landing a massive contract with a biotech firm, to a dealership and traded it in. I didn't want any outward symbols of wealth that they could see and question beforehand. I took a taxi to the house. The element of surprise was everything. Before leaving my own apartment, a beautiful new place by the lake that I had recently moved into, I stopped by a specialty wine shop. I didn't buy the cheap Chardonnay I used to bring. I bought a bottle of vintage Bordeaux, a wine so expensive that the clerk had to retrieve it from a locked case. It would be my hostess gift to my mother, a subtle, final piece of the puzzle. As I walked up the familiar driveway, my purse felt heavy on my shoulder. Tucked inside, next to my wallet, was the crisp folded deed. My heart was beating a steady rhythmic drum. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was an actress about to step onto a stage for the final, show-stopping scene of a play I had written, directed, and produced myself. I was perfectly, terrifyingly quiet. Walking through the front door was like stepping into a photograph from a year ago. Everything was exactly the same scent of roasting turkey and cinnamon, the same loud chatter from the living room where the men were watching football, the same condescending smiles and air kisses from my aunts and cousins as I entered. They saw my expensive sweater and probably assumed it was a cheap knockoff. They saw the expensive bottle of wine and likely thought I'd wasted my last few dollars on it to try and impress them. Their perception of me was a fortress, impenetrable to any evidence that contradicted their narrative. I was, and always would be to them, poor, directionless Ashlyn. Brielle breezed past me, giving me a once-over. "Nice of you to show up," she said, her tone implying I was lucky to be invited at all. Then came the moment. As everyone began to move toward the dining room, my mother, flustered and playing the part of the grand hostess, gestured vaguely towards the kitchen. "Ashlyn, dear, we're a little short on space at the main table again. Do you mind grabbing a, She didn't even have to finish the sentence. Emery was already there, a triumphant smirk on her face, holding out the ceremonial offering, a single paper plate. Last year, this gesture had shattered me. This year, I took the plate from her hand, my fingers brushing hers. I looked her directly in the eye and gave her a small, serene smile. "Thanks," I said, my voice even and calm. Her smirk wavered for a second, confused by my lack of reaction. She had expected me to flinch, to look away, to show some sign of hurt. My placid acceptance was not part of her script. I took the plate and I waited. I stood by the wobbly card table, the designated seat of my shame, and I watched the pageant unfold. I watched them take their seats, laughing and arranging their embroidered napkins on their laps. My father, at the head of the table, stood to make his traditional toast. He raised his crystal glass, the expensive wine I had brought gleaming within it. "To family," he began, his voice booming with self-satisfaction, "and to the rewards of hard work, to earning your place in the world, and building a life you can be proud of." He looked around the table, his gaze sweeping past me, as if I were a piece of furniture. "It's a lesson some of us learn later than others, but it's the most important one there is." A murmur of agreement went around the table. Brielle shot me a quick, pitying glance. That was it. That was the cue I had been waiting for. I set the paper plate down on the card table. Slowly, deliberately, I stood up. I turned and walked out of the dining room, my footsteps the only sound in a sudden lull in the conversation. I could feel their eyes on my back, could almost hear their thoughts. "There she goes, off to have a sulk." I returned from the hallway, my purse clutched in my hand. I walked past my empty seat at the kids' table. I walked directly to the main table, to the empty space between the grand, golden brown turkey and the porcelain gravy boat filled with the gravy. I was sure my mother had made me prepare. The laughter died, the conversation choked. Every single eye was on me. I reached into my purse, my hand didn't shake. I pulled out the crisp, folded sheaf of papers. With a quiet, definitive thud, I slid the deed onto the center of the gleaming oak table. I let my gaze travel across the faces staring back at me, from my uncle to my aunt, to Emery, to Brielle, and finally to my parents. I let the silence stretch, thick and heavy. "This house?" I said, my voice not loud, but carrying to every corner of the stunned room. "You're all sitting in my house." The reaction was not instantaneous, it was a slow-motion wave of cognitive dissonance washing over them. Their brains were trying and failing to process the information. Then, the first crack in their composure appeared. My uncle's jaw, which had been set in a self-satisfied smile, went slack. My aunt's hand, holding her wine glass, froze mid-air. Color drained from Emery's face, leaving her perfectly applied makeup looking like a garish mask on a pale canvas. Brielle was the first to speak, her voice a strangled stammer. "You're—" Just as the word lying left her lips, the doorbell rang. The sound made everyone jump. A moment later, the front door opened, and a figure stepped into the hallway, framed by the doorway. It was Maureen Hensley. She was dressed impeccably in a chic winter coat, her sharp eyes taking in the entire scene in a single glance. "She's not," Maureen said, her voice cutting through the tension with surgical precision as she walked into the dining room. "I should know. I taught her everything about shrewd investments." From the window overlooking the front yard, a neighbor who had been invited for dessert, Mrs. Doyle, gasped loud enough for everyone to hear, "Ashlyn? The little art girl from next door?" The chaos of their disbelief was my cue. I reached into my purse again and pulled out my phone. I didn't say another word. I just opened the county property app, the one that shows public records of ownership. I turned the screen toward Brielle, my finger pointing to the entry. Owner, Ashlyn Porter. Mortgage status, paid in full. I then opened my banking app and showed her the record of the wire transfer to the bank, the one that paid off the mortgage. The evidence was digital, irrefutable, and devastating. Brielle stared at the phone, her face crumbling as the reality crashed down on her. Emery went so pale, I thought she might actually faint. My mother just sat there, her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with a horror that was almost comical. The fork my uncle had been holding finally slipped from his numb fingers and clattered onto his plate, the sound echoing the final shattering blow to their world. The silence that fell over the room was absolute, a vacuum where laughter and arrogance used to be. It was the silence of a kingdom whose walls had just been breached, whose rulers were suddenly revealed to be powerless jesters. No one looked at me. No one looked at each other. They stared at the deed on the table, at my phone, at the floor, anywhere but at the face of the woman they had spent a lifetime underestimating. My mother had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide and glassy with shock. My father's face was a mask of gray, stunned disbelief. He looked older, smaller, diminished. He was the first to finally break the suffocating quiet. He cleared his throat, a dry, rasping sound. He looked up, not at me, but at the deed, as if it were a judgment handed down from on high. "So," he began, his voice a hoarse, hollow version of its former boom. "So, we rent from you now?" The question hung in the air, a pathetic admission of his complete and utter defeat. It was the ultimate reversal. The patriarch, the man who had preached about earning one's place, was now asking his failure of a daughter for permission to live in his own home. I looked at him, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, no triumph, just a quiet, clean finality. I gave a small, simple nod. "If you want," I said, my voice calm and even, the tone I might use with a new client. "The lease terms will need to be finalized, of course. Rent will be due on the 1st of the month. We can discuss the details next week." Silence again. The weight of my words, of their new reality, settled over them like a shroud. They were no longer the generous patrons allowing their pathetic daughter to crash with them. They were tenants. Their home was now my asset. Their security was in my hands. I picked up my wine glass from the main table, the one they hadn't set for me. I raised it high, the expensive Bordeaux glowing like a ruby in the light of the chandelier. I smiled, a real, genuine smile, and looked around at their frozen, shattered faces. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said. I didn't stay for dinner. I had made my point. The aftermath was not my concern. I moved into my new apartment by the lake, a beautiful space with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the water. It was quiet, it was peaceful, and it was mine. Vivid Walls Co. continued its silent, steady ascent. We crossed the $1 million revenue mark the following spring. I used the capital to expand our services, branching out into custom installations and art consulting for large corporate collections. Harper, my first ally, my first believer, became my full-time creative director, with a corner office and a salary that finally reflected her immense talent. She thrived, leading our growing team of artists with a confidence and vision that made me proud every single day. Maureen officially retired a few months after that Thanksgiving. She sold her agency and used the money to travel the world. She sent me postcards from Paris, from Tokyo, from Buenos Aires. The last one I received had a picture of an ancient, beautiful temple. On the back, she had written just one sentence: "You proved yourself right. I knew you would." My relationship with my family, if it could still be called that, transformed into something unrecognizable. They signed the lease. The rent check arrived on time every month, a silent, formal acknowledgement of the New World Order. I visited on my terms, which were infrequent. When I did, the atmosphere was thick with a strange, cautious deference. They treated me with a fragile, fearful respect. They asked about my business in hushed, careful tones. Brielle avoided my gaze. Emery tried to make awkward, fawning small talk. The condescension was gone, replaced by a palpable fear. They weren't afraid of what I would do to them. They were afraid of what I had already done. I had held a mirror up to them, and they were horrified by the reflection. But I found, to my surprise, that I didn't savor their fear. I didn't need their apologies or their respect. The victory wasn't in their humiliation. The victory was in my freedom. I hadn't spent a year building an empire just to lord it over them. I had built it to save myself. I didn't need revenge. I needed to know that I could stand on my own 2 feet, that my worth wasn't determined by their judgment or their approval. I needed to build a world for myself so solid and so real that their opinions could no longer touch me. And I had. One brushstroke, one contract, one brick at a time. I had built it. They called her a nobody. She became the owner of the house they laughed in. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Let me know in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if this story gave you goosebumps. Thanks for watching. Remember, sometimes, paper plates are the beginning of power.